Now, as we look out of one of the main windows of the Grand Hall, there's a light tunnel underneath the ground level. Interestingly, that is part of our underground railway, or more accurately, a tramway. And the coal would be delivered at one end of the building, and there was an underground tram system where the coal was moved from one end of the building to the other, and there were various hoist points where wicker baskets full of coal would have been hoisted up to the top of the building, because almost every room had a fireplace, and that's why we've got so many chimneys, including the servants' quarters. Because up until this time, 1841, up until this time, traditionally all the beds would have been warmed with warming pans. But Turner was an innovative man, he was a modern thinker, and he employed Burn to bring in the latest ideas. Indoor water closets everywhere in the building, heating throughout the building, and fireplaces even in the servants' quarters. He would show you the hole where it was hoisted up. And we got the shaft, which was used as a coal hoist. We've now run all our services like internet and telephone lines and all the rest of it. It's all run up inside that shaft to make use of it.
Excellent.
Is there any ghosts in the house?
Well, that's funny, because we actually have two ladies who travel up as ghost hunters, and they've stayed in various parts of the mansion just to see if we do have any ghosts.
Yeah.
Now, they report little balls of light floating around, and a little girl in the courtyard, and a lady in the mansion. I've seen the odd shadow here and there I can't quite explain,
Yes.
but I keep an open mind.
Yes, thank you.
OK, we've come through to the library now, and you'll recall I mentioned about the Arnhem connection and the new bookcases, and indeed the magnificent collection of books we now have courtesy of the NUT and local well-wishers. We're just stood underneath Sir Isaac Newton's head, and he's hidden away in a decorative plaster, and it's the only little head, and you would have a job to find him if you didn't know where he actually was. But I'm sure a member of staff would be able to point him out to you. The library is also laid out for Sunday lunches, and we can hold up to 200 covers in here on a Sunday, and those are available if you phone through to our reception team, and they can take a booking for that. We've just popped into the Orangery, which is a beautiful building, like a great big greenhouse. We can hear the wind outside because the weather's not too pleasant at the moment. But at the far end, we've got a white table with a big bouquet on top of it, and that doubles up as an altar. The registrar would come in, the bride and groom would come down, all the chairs are arranged like a church and as pews, and the bride and groom get married in the Orangery. Now, we have some original Victorian rolled glass here, but unfortunately over the years many panes have been broken through bad weather, and when we come to replace them, we have to replace it with what we call heritage glass. And heritage glass is incredibly expensive compared to a standard pane of glass, but it mimics the original Victorian design and flaws in the glass, but it has the modern safety features. Out of the Orangery windows, we can see lots of snowdrops coming through, and absolutely beautiful at this time of year, and we have 28 acres of grounds for our guests to enjoy. We've got two gardeners, and they do a magnificent job maintaining all the trees, all the grounds and the lawns to keep it as immaculate as it is. We also are one of the country houses around the country who open up for Open Gardens Day. Now, the Open Garden scheme was in the 1920s, and you paid £1 to visit a country house garden, and all that money was collected for charity. Now, 2 years ago, we were approached by the Open Gardens Society and asked, would we be kind enough to open up our gardens, because they had found that Stoke Rochford Hall was one of the original supporters of that charity, and we opened our gardens up back in the 1920s as the earliest members and supporters of that charity. On the entrance to the garden through the balustrade wall, there's a little silver plaque in the shape of an old shilling, and that's got the design to say that we were a founder member of the Open Garden scheme. But it's fabulous. All around the building you'll see lots of radiators. These are the originals, but they've all been converted to modern pressures and modern machinery.
How far back did
grow the things like oranges and lemons? Because they're not native to this country, so where did they get the plants from?
Well, they've been dabbling with growing particularly oranges and lemons since the 17th century, and that obviously predates this house, but because an orange in the 17th century is called a navarre.
As in Spain?
As in Spain, Spanish orange.
Yes.
Again, it's like things like tomatoes. We never called them tomatoes when they first came into this country. They were called love apples. That's correct. Yeah.
They grow quinces to make marmalade, because apparently marmalade, I don't speak Portuguese, comes from the word marmelo or something like that.
I know that is a root for the word, but all the walls out here, we found hooks in various walls where the quinces and passion fruit would have been grown on the sunny sides. Okay, well, we've come into the Turner room, and this is a room that's got the family portraits in. Now, unfortunately, we don't know who they all are because the records have been lost over the years. We do have a nice painting of Christopher Turner, and that's the son of the man who actually had the house built. And on his side, we believe that may be his sister, but it may also be Lady Blanche Finch Hatton. Now, it's curious because on the back of her chair she's wearing a cape, and that's edged with ermine, which tells us she's a duchess in her own right. So research continues, as they say. We also have a nice painting of Herbert Brooke Turner in his mess kit of the 17th 21st Lancers, who were the local regiment, and the colonel of the regiment was Lord Manners from Belvoir Castle, and Turner entered into the regiment and became a major. He survived the First World War, and he's wearing a military cross, the Mons Star, the War Medal and the Defence Medal, so he would have joined up very early on. The tragedy for the family was that their son and inheritor of the estate, Christopher Turner, was killed near Popperinge in October 1914. This room has a magnificent ceiling, again completely replaced in the same manner as the Grand Hall and the library. But what's interesting about this one, it has a series of designs with some strap work running around the central features. Inside the strap work are a number of roses, and each one of these little decorative flowers is handmade, and there are 1,048 handmade roses in this room alone. Also in this room we have some very large mirrors. The mirrors are in Rococo style, but they were destroyed during the fire, and the ones we see now are complete replicas. And the interesting reconstruction method is that they're not carved wooden frames, they're actually cast in plaster and then gilded.
Am I right in thinking that plasterers used to mix their plaster not with water but with beer, because it's prevented the plaster from drying out too quickly, and which is where we get the phrase, somebody's drunk, they're plastered.
That's absolutely true. And also they used to put horsehair in it to give it some stability and rigidness when they're actually shaping it, because the horsehair would act a bit like iron rods inside concrete today when they're casting up a bridge structure or something of that nature. The Oak Room was the only public room to survive the fire, and the fire brigade did a magnificent job of putting a curtain of water between this room and the burning building. The biggest problem was, after pouring about 10 tons of firefighting water on the roof, the ceiling was in grave danger of collapse because the plaster just absorbed the water and became very, very heavy. So what the restoration team did, they built a floor-to-ceiling scaffold and left about 18 inches of gap between the scaffold and the roof, and they then slid in bales of sheep fleece, and the sheep fleece drew the water out of the plaster, and over an 18-month period the ceiling dried out, and that stopped it from collapsing. As we work our way down the walls, we have some lovely paintings of the Turner family, and two in particular are unusual. They're oval in shape, and the costume of the people would suggest they're late Regency period, because one of the lady in particular has rings in her hair. We're not absolutely sure. We don't know who they are. We don't know who the artist is. We don't even know when they were painted. But imagine this. The building's on fire. There's a course running, and it's Her Majesty's Customs and Excise on the course. And these great big chaps, all about 6 foot, they offered to help, and they took out all the furniture they could carry, including a piano, and they bumped the piano down the steps of the mansion, and very musical it was too. But they rescued everything movable and assisted our staff in that task. The ceiling is more primitive than the other decorative ceilings in the house, and we think this is probably one of the first rooms to be done. And as they developed and the house grew, they became more adventurous and more decorative as they went through. Originally, the ceiling was painted a magnolia colour when the house was first built, but over the years that had been redecorated to be in a dark green colour, very dull green. So our friends from English Heritage, when they came back and gave us advice on the restoration of the house, asked us to put it back to the original magnolia colour, and that's what you see today, recreated back to how the house would have looked in the 1840s. Again, as we examine this room, lovely oak panelling around it. This is original, wasn't destroyed, and very dark oak panelling. The main feature of this room, however, is the fireplace. There's a magnificent black and white Italian marble fireplace, and I normally play a game with people who come to visit, and I ask them to put a price on it. And I get various prices from £10,000 through £25,000, £100,000, however people are thinking. And as I progress and play the game, I give them more information and say, well, it's black and white Italian marble. They'll give me a price. I'd say, OK, then, if I told you it was made at the very end of the 16th or the very early 17th century, would that increase your figure? And, of course, the people playing the game would increase their figure on what they're going to offer me for the fireplace. I then deliver the bombshell and tell them it is the only known sculpture by Rubens. The fireplace has been valued at £5.5 million. Now, beautiful piece of work. We've got a pair of little cherubs called putti on the top of the chimney breast. And as we look at the supporters on each side of it, 2 charming ladies, but they are sphinxes because she's got a lady's head and she's got a lion's feet. So it's a pair of supporters each side are Egyptian-type sphinxes. But all in all, magnificent fireplace, which obviously predates this house, and it comes from the house which was demolished after this one was built. Interestingly, there's been a building within the grounds since Roman times.
And who are the paintings on the wall, David?
Yes, the paintings above the fireplace, that's the last Christopher Turner and his wife Rosemary. Now, Christopher died in 1940, and it was incidentally 1940 when the War Office took over the mansion for war duties prior to the parachute regiment arriving in 1942. One day we had a visitor come, and this old gentleman came in on his walking sticks, and he said, can you take me into the room with a big black and white fireplace, son? I said, yeah, come on, Pop, come on through. I said, why do you want to see that? And he said, he said, I was a paratrooper here during the war, and I just wanted to come and look at it again. He said, because, he said, I was a soldier. He said, I was a young sergeant. And he said, all the bloody officers lived in the house, and we weren't allowed in it. I was in a tent in the grounds, and it was soaking wet and cold. So he said, me and my mate, one day, we snuck into the house, went into the room with the big fireplace, climbed on top of it, did a power roll off the top just for devilment, and ran out before we got caught. Upstairs, downstairs, you know, the old, you've seen Downton Abbey when the old bells go. Yeah. That's to summon tea, bring the servant to my room. That's where we are. But these are all over the house.
Yes,
but of course...
is there a name for these little things?
Bell pulls.
Just bell pulls?
Bell pulls, yeah.
Oh, cool.
People think it's secret cupboards and all sorts, but no, it's a bell pull. The area where we're standing now, we're on the green staircase. It's called the green staircase so that we know as staff which end of the building people are talking about. We have a green staircase and a blue staircase. The green staircase actually is all the way up to the servants' quarters, or what are now our magnificent superior bedrooms. But we've got a nice light atrium at the top, which allows natural daylight to come down onto the staircase. And it's a cantilever staircase. In other words, there's no supporting wall to the treads. The treads are actually built into the fabric of the building. And this would have been the below stairs or behind doors staircase for the servants to use.
And you think for all those feet that have run up and down.
Absolutely. Carrying everything, you know. There were 2 servant areas within Stoke Rochford Hall complex. The first area was where the ladies were accommodated, and that was called Petticoat Lane. The gentlemen, to keep them away from the ladies, were accommodated above the old stables block, and that was known as Bachelor's Row. Post-war, the building became a teacher training college, and with remarkable foresight opened in 1948 as the Kesteven Teacher Training College. Foresight because it took 2 years to train a teacher. So by the time of 1950, they would have been trained to go out into their teaching jobs. And this was in response to the baby boom, which was started in 1945 when the servicemen returned home from war. The area where we're standing now, the Crush Hall. The reason it has such an unusual name, if you can imagine 50 students coming in one direction, 50 students coming in another direction, and 50 students coming down a staircase, all mingling together, going between lessons, carrying all their books. It became the Crush Hall as they were all weaving and fighting their way through to get to their next lesson. Also in the Crush Hall is a magnificent wooden staircase. Now this staircase fools the eye. It appears to be a lot older than it actually is, but the wooden panels in it were created between 1928 and 1929. And incidentally, another room within the hotel was converted to be a workshop for the Christopher Turner of the time to use to convert all these panels into these decorative murals. The scenes displayed are Italianate or certainly continental, because we know that he went on the Grand Tour. And when he did the Grand Tour over in Europe, he took his sketchbook with him and sketched the things he liked. On his return to this country, the Great War got in the way, so he shelved the drawings. However, in 1928-29, the drawings were resurrected, and they were then built into these magnificent murals we see now, whereby the staircase was significantly altered and these murals were incorporated into it. We have some very interesting scenes, one of which is a pyramid, but it's not an Egyptian pyramid. It looks as if it's a funerary monument, possibly of Italian nature. And there's also a big castle, which is possibly Carcassonne, judging by the turrets on it. But we're not convinced, and research continues, and it's make an interesting project to find out where these places actually are.
Yes.